Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hey everyone, welcome to the discussion for Too Many Bones. That's the cover of the trove chest. I don't have the boxes anymore. But this is one that we're a little bit behind the curve on Board Games Unlocked on getting this discussed. Every other reviewer has, but with them being on GameFound right now, I figured, hey, let's go ahead and get it up and recorded. And I love this game. I think this game is an absolute blast in every aspect. It's not without its flaws, of course, but as with, Cloudspire doesn't have, it's not perfect either. But I just think Chip Theory really does almost everything right in replicating, like, kind of the video game feel for whatever they aim to do. And let's get this out of the way. They have the best production quality in any game, I think, just with their plastic cards, their poker chips, their dice, their storage system, their neoprene mats. Everything is fantastic in that regard, so as long as we're not beating that over the head, I think we can agree that production for your, like, big bang for your buck. Mm-hmm. So, with that being said, Zach, what do you think of Too Many Bones?
I like it a lot.
Oh, awesome. I expected you to be like, I hate it.
No, prior to coming here, with my limited experience, I was going to compare this to 4 games. Kingdom Death.
Okay.
Because I don't play a lot of cooperative battle games.
True.
Kingdom Death, Village Attacks, Gloomhaven, and there was another one. I blank on it right now. But out of all of those, this does have the best production quality. I mean, Kingdom Death has really great production quality. But
if you put it together correctly with their no examples.
Yeah, it's astronomically expensive.
I'll never let it go.
I after playing this 2 scenarios almost all the way through, I already knew my gripes with this game, and I already knew what I liked about it. Playing a full scenario, I like a little bit more now.
Oh, awesome. So it's really fascinating because there's just so much variety with this game, especially if you have everything like I do. Even the base game has quite a bit of variety. Now, the games that you mentioned, this isn't like those. And out of all 3 of those, I think they have better table presence. Yeah. Because this game looks boring as fuck. Like, it's literally a hex and a square mats. Yeah. That this one isn't like Kingdom Death. You're just like, whoa. Yeah. Gloomhaven has kind of the same thing. All of those games have like table draw, but I think this one has a lot of depth to it that games like Kingdom Death don't. Mm-hmm. It's very flat, and this one is just like I played patches. So, for example, we're talking about variety. I have seen 5 Gearlocs played: Patches, Tantrum, Picket. Oh god, the Bard from Undertow, Kelly. That's not her name. Stanza. Yeah. And Duster. Yeah. I've played Patches, Picket, and I think I've only played those 2, and they're just so radically different from one another that it's mind blowing. And they're all viable. Like, you have your stereotypical RPG, fantasy RPG, you have your healer, you have your tank, you have your that. But it's not just that. So, for example, I played as Patches, and he's the healer. And I pretty much only played him as a straight healer, a combat medic. Because they have the little tiles, and I love that. I love the titles for what the builds you can do. Right. And I think everyone has 3 builds, and then their consumables. And it tells you on here, like on their sheet or on their playmat, combat medic, forester, and stim sticker, and it's like just with one character you could fight against every single tyrant, play them radically, and get a different experience. I could play combat medic against every single one and not be like playing the combat, like I wouldn't be bored. Right. Or I can just be like, oh, let's try stim sticker. Let's try not healing like an idiot, even though he does have ways to heal. It's mind-boggling how great that aspect is, because too many, I think, fantasy campaign games, there is a campaign to this, I don't know what it's like, but too many fantasy RPGs just kind of fall into the, Yep. All right. That was the healer.
Right.
You know. So, so what are your thoughts on the different characters?
I like Tantrum a lot. I played patches, but the scenario that I played, it was only the beginning, so I didn't get a chance to build up his abilities very much.
You also played him solo, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are the only two characters I played. I have an idea of what the other two are like, and I've read some about the additional characters. I think that would add a lot more content to the game. I think most of the content that you're experiencing is in the battle scenarios and building your character up rather than the cards. I think the weakest part about the game is the lack of diversity with the cards. I like that they are cards compared to reading out of a book.
True.
That's a pain.
They give enough flavor, I think, in the cards.
And they're easy to set up, and you don't have to shuffle through a book and say, "Oh, stop, wait." You know, I had to do that with Kingdom Death for hours and hours, and people,
oh god, yeah.
I could see the boredom.
I mean, even like Sleeping Gods and stuff like that. It's just like,
yeah.
versus like now some games, Gloomhaven and Midara have foreteller, where it's just like, oh, it's right here, and then it's read to you, which makes it 10 times better. But yeah, anyway, keep going.
I think if they were to ever go back in time and improve this, I think investing in someone writing a slightly better narrative might...
Sure.
Because I think the narrative that they've written is really decent. I think there needs to be more.
I think it's, because it's like they want you to experience the world of whatever it's called.
And that's obviously a big portion of the game. This game isn't as crunchy as far as the battle goes as a lot of the other games are, so they're obviously giving you a immersive experience, and to immerse you all the way, that's an important aspect to it. Yeah,
it's because they have like phrases and words that every fantasy RPG wants to do, like, hey, we're unique. It's like, no, you're not. You're all derivatives of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
But
these are basically hobbits.
Yes.
Hobbit, halfling things.
Yes, that's exactly kind of what I was thinking. And I agree. I think this game could do, and now this does have 2 campaigns that might give you that engrossed feel. This very much feels like a one-shot. If I were to play D&D and be like, hey, come over, we're doing a one-shot. That's kind of what this is. Here's the big bad. Like, your goal in most one-shots are to, go through kind of a small story and fight him.
Yeah.
And you kind of have that. You have, and even on the back of this, which I covered, that's the encounter cover card. These are essentially, and I love the day tracker because it does help kind of be like, oh, okay, well, we rested. This is what we did on this day.
Right.
And it does kind of give you the sense of progression, but there isn't an overarching narrative of kind of like, what the hell are we doing?
Yeah.
We're Gearlocs. What the hell is that? We're hobbits trying to prove ourselves to God or whoever it is. And then we go fight the big bad, and we beat him. Or we don't.
Right.
And I like that. Because sometimes, I gotta tell you, man, too many games are coming out that are campaigns. And I buy them all because I love having I love just having them. Yeah. Like, oh, I'll never run out of story. But at the same time, it's like, God, another fucking... Because I always want to do it as a series on the channel. So I want to do that's my Let's Play portion of the channel.
Right.
And it's like, oh god, this is going to take forever. Midara is already going to take fucking 5 years. I still haven't beaten Gloomhaven.
Yeah.
Like, it's just... Because on top of trying to do the campaign games, I'm also trying to do newer games that aren't campaign. So it's nice. It is a breath of fresh air. But I agree with you that the narrative, they could do more. A lore book or whatever.
And I know you talked about the original version of the game didn't have the upgraded health chips.
Yes.
And that's something
these are like a must. Well, I think the original version did. You just have to buy them separate.
And even though that's important to you, I would have gladly had cardboard health and had twice as many cards. I would have gladly had cardboard cards and not plastic cards. It's not necessary.
Yeah.
These parts of the game are great, and they can stay as they are. The amount of dice, I like rolling dice, but the plastic stuff, nobody's playing this underwater. It's a nice thing to tell people, but it's not necessarily necessary. You can sleeve your cards and you don't have to worry about that.
You can.
But just a little bit more of work into the narrative, and just cards in general, more loot cards. I
mean, granted, if you think about it, we played for like 2.5 hours, and we got 12 loot cards. Now, granted, I do have everything.
Right.
So this is coming from your experience of having the base game,
Right.
where it's not that stack.
Right.
So I definitely see where you're coming from.
And some of the only one of those cards came out, and it was specifically for Undertow, or maybe it's for
True.
for some type of scenario.
No, Undertow has water battles.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, granted, the Trove loot I think gives you enough. You're not getting a bunch of these, and then so here my biggest thing with my biggest complaint with the negative or with the encounters or narration is every single game of Too Many Bones, at least in the base game, you are going to start the same 3 cards.
Yeah.
And I really don't like narrative RPG, because it claims to be a dice builder RPG. So if you're going to do a role-playing game with a narrative, that would be boring if every D&D campaign started off the exact same way.
Yeah. And even for that, I mean, that's something that reminds me of the KDM book, where you have the 1 through 100 scenarios.
Yes.
They had a very... And it's both irritating and great. Mm-hmm. If they had, a D100 system that you could roll, and then you could look in a book and pick out of 200 scenarios, and that's what happened, and that covered your first 3, that would be interesting.
Yes.
Even if you ran into the same thing a second time, which this game's not as replayable, I would say, as some games like KDM, and we both have our gripes with KDM, but KDM has like a long, same with Gloomhaven, you can play it and play it and play it. This does have a half-life of a certain amount of time. I think once you fight each boss twice, kind of have done it.
Yeah.
But there's a few bosses, and these games take anywhere from 2 to 5 hours.
Yeah.
So that's a decent amount of content.
Yeah, and when you have everything for it, besides, of course, the newest stuff, is you have, 12? You have 12 Gearlocs, and you have probably, I didn't count them, but like 15 Tyrants, if not more. So your replayability comes from...
That's twice as much in the base. There's 7 in the base game, or 7 or 8.
I think so.
Yeah.
So you have your actually it says right. Yep, 7 Tyrants. Your replayability comes from fighting Tyrants with different baddies. And actually, speaking of that, that's a good point, because my friend Brad, who's been on the channel before, I asked him before I knew you even had this if he wanted to do this. He's like, dude, I'm burned out.
Yeah.
He played this so many times. He's like, I don't want to. He's like, I don't feel like touching it.
Yeah.
And he really doesn't like playing this with other people.
Yeah.
Like, this game, he thinks it's best solo. I don't know. I haven't tried it solo. But I would never do this with with 3 or 4 people.
Yeah.
It's just
I would love to try it, and on that end, I looked at a poll, and a couple of the base characters, especially Patches, they strongly suggest you don't play solo with him.
Yeah.
He's rated the easiest.
He's rated
as far
as 2, yeah.
which is
solo.
higher than every other character, I believe. I could be wrong on that. Well, that's the difficulty. So he has the lowest difficulty, yet he's very difficult to play with, which doesn't really make much sense.
Because his damage output, it's weird that he is a 2, because it's like, he's not going to die as quick, but he doesn't do a lot of damage.
Right.
And it's like, you never send a medic out to fight your war.
Yeah.
So...
And you get a lot of those, in the base game, you get a lot of those thick-skinned characters that there's just no way to... Which, minor complaint, there's a randomness to the game.
There is, and that's definitely what I was going to bring up next, was... Because I remember you were on the fence of even if you liked this game. So I was curious, with it being a dice builder, and that's what I heard Shut Up and Sit Down say. I think Dice Tower, Tom mentioned the same thing of the randomness. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think, with my copy, I think I'm going to introduce it to my group, see if they're initially super interested. We'll continue playing through a few scenarios. I'll probably sell it after that. Realistically, just because I know... I like to keep a really tight group of games that I know that I'm going to play consistently, and I know this is not going to last that long.
Right.
But I do like it. I think that for the people who are into cooperative combat games, this is going to last 3 times as long as it'll last for me. And I think it's worth the investment. It's not that expensive for the base game.
For the base game, no, but
it's
to get...
$130.
Huh?
I think it's $130 or $140.
Something like that.
Yeah.
To get everything on their current Kickstarter is $1,100.
And that I would advise, like any game, I'd advise going all in on.
Get the base game first, see if you like it, because we're talking a lot about stuff, and we're kind of saying a few things that are gripes, but nothing that's big. But for the randomness of the game, I think they do it a lot better than some. And we keep bringing KDM up mainly just as kind of a reference for RPGs, not that these are like polar opposites of games.
Yeah.
But a good example of a game with dice that does it poorly would be KDM. Roll 1, dead.
Yeah.
Great. Glad that we spent 7 games building this character up and he's just dead. Okay, that was a lot of fun.
And I do think there's ways to negate that a little bit.
You have a once in a lifetime reroll.
Yeah.
Or you can just cheat. In here though, and it even kind of says in the rulebook, which I always like when games call out something like that, so you're not blindsided and pissed off. You're like, well, the rulebook did say you can get screwed on dice.
Yeah.
But there's 2 things that I like about the randomness. One, if you miss, you get the bones, which it's funny, the game is called Too Many Bones, but like they hardly ever come up.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a compensation. Oh yeah, you missed and you didn't do any damage, but you got 3 bones out of that.
Yeah.
What's your backup plan?
Yeah.
Love that instead of it just being blanks all over the place.
It can never be said at the end of the game like, well, this game was a waste. Because you always have that option at the end of the day, and you can do something cool, whether it help somebody else or take out one of the enemies. Or, yeah.
And the second thing about the randomness that I like is, let's say you get a full party wipe. It's not like, oh, game's over. Mm-hmm. Glad you played 2 hours and it ends. It's just like, no, we just lost a day.
I will say, if you are on an important battle, you're going to re-enter the same battle in a more difficult situation. So you're going to be hoping to get lucky.
Oh, yes. There is, yes.
Especially later in the game, whenever you get some of those more difficult cards out, you could put yourself in a bad spot and just be retrying and hoping to get a lucky roll.
Right. Because not only do you rely on dice, because like let's say as patches, if I was a healer and I kept rolling a 1 on my med kit, it's just like that could be frustrating when I'm trying to heal and it's like for some reason I just can't.
Right.
The randomness of also the encounters of the baddies that happen to come out. That can drastically, and the loot that you get. Like, you can get loot. I think the only reason we actually succeeded on the Goblin King was because we happened to roll extremely well and get the Tyrant, because you might not get the Tyrant encounter, but we happened to get the one that was like, oh, hey, we disarmed it, and it's a bomb that we get to blow up his throne, so now we can attack him up front.
Yeah.
If that didn't happen, I think we would have he had 4 archers. Like, they were all archers, so he just kept blowing us back, and we just kept getting shot.
Right.
So that can happen. This is a game that it has dice. Dice happen. If you're going in and buying this game, and then you're upset about randomness, I think that's on you. It's called a dice builder. There
are dice games, though, that are specifically geared, and this isn't a complaint again about the game. I don't think it's deceivingly random, but there are games that balance the dice. The dice are just used as a conception of randomness when it's not actually all that random. There's a lot of things that can change it.
Right.
For example, I mean, the loot you said was random, but we do have the ability whenever it's the rest phase to search for a new card.
Yeah.
You're gambling a little bit because if you don't roll bones whenever you roll that, you could potentially lose your item.
Just throw a loot, yeah.
The item you're wagering is probably not that important anyway if you're going to do that. So that allows you to shuffle through that deck and hopefully get something that's better. Because there are cards where you're just like, why would I use this? And then there's other cards that are decent that are pretty helpful.
Yeah, like I had the net, and the net could have been one of those things that there is kind of mitigation of like, you had a scenario where there was an encounter that you could not beat, and having a net, you can be like, oh, actually he's gone, so now it's beatable.
Right.
Once again, you have to be lucky to get that loot card, and unlucky to get that scenario.
Right.
So, I would definitely say the game's balanced. In every game that I've played, I haven't run into a situation where it's like, this is impossible, but I have run into situations where this is fucking hard.
Yeah.
Like, every single character deals poison damage,
right.
and we don't have patches to mitigate that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of another thing. Kind of like if you're playing Pandemic, and it's like, well, we're trying to cure diseases. Why do we not have the medic? Right. You know, I wouldn't say any character is a staple. Like, you can definitely play this game. I think we would have actually been fine if I picked Duster or Picket and Tantrum.
Yeah.
It would have gone over well. But there are, of course, just like every D&D campaign, you should have a cleric.
Right.
You can play without one, but you probably should just have a healer on your team.
And I'd be interested in playing other combinations, because we played 2 of the 4 characters, and I could see how Pickett could defend while Boomer is building up a bomb. I know that's kind of the idea with their characters.
Yeah, and I've played as Pickett where I fought Nom 1v1, and I just had a superior defense.
Yeah.
I didn't do a lot of damage, but I was able to tank his hits while chipping him for 1.
Yeah.
You know, and of course, with every character, you pretty much play their basic build. At least that's what you're going for before you try to mix and match.
Right.
So, going back on the characters, this is the furthest away from a gateway game that I can imagine. Like, kind of like if you're a Euro gamer and you're like, oh, I want to try Vidal's games. It's like, have you played literally anything else? Because you will not have a good time playing his games because they are extremely heavy.
Yeah.
This is another one like that. That's the reason why I wanted to do this on the channel with someone who had played it multiple times, and with characters that we had played and kind of grasped the concepts a little bit, because boy is this game slow to learn.
Yeah.
It's like, I want to try this character. Okay, it's a difficulty 4.
And the rule book is
ass.
There's no other way to put it. It's poorly written.
Yeah.
It's poorly organized.
It wants to be friendly and like buddy and kind of be like, hey, now that you know this, you can learn this. And it's like, but it's not cohesive.
It makes me wish they had, for lack of a better explanation, like the wingspan treatment, where you open up the book and this is how you start your first scenario.
Yes.
Step by step. Because you go in and there's, for not only every character has these symbols, I mean, there's separate symbols for each character. There's separate words
Keywords.
for enemies. So you constantly have to be checking the characters you're playing, which if you're playing with up to 4 people, then every person can only focus on this, and then you were focusing on those. Yeah.
Like, except cooperative, which makes it better because I'm not... I mean, granted, if I play Root and someone doesn't understand, I'm not like, it's competitive, so fuck off. Right. Like, I don't do that.
But at least you understand, if you play one character, you understand how they might work. You can say, this is the area where I look up what these abilities do. You're not going to know how the character works immediately. One thing that they say with this game is oftentimes people who start with a character stay with that character for a while.
Yeah.
Because you don't understand it on your first playthrough, and you're not going to get the maximum output of it until you play a couple times.
Exactly. And then... But if you do play it a couple times, then you're going to play patches as a medic before you even try to branch off at any other type of build.
Right.
Which is amazing still. Like, I love the fact that it's not like, oh, one and done, I know what patches does, throw them away. It's like, oh, now I can do this combo.
Right.
But yes, it is extremely difficult because not only do you have to figure out what their dice do, because the dice don't immediately, what the fuck is that symbol? It is all here, which is great. I love that. And you could cross-reference, oh, okay, that means I get a loot. That's pretty cool. But you also have a back. And it does give you a beginner build strat, which I think is very much needed, with a YouTube symbol on it, so you can watch a video on the character if that's how you learn.
I have watched their YouTube channel, and they have, 15 videos that are in between 1 and 7 minutes that explain different areas. Not the best organized, because as you watch, it doesn't explain the entire game to you. It just explains little key parts to it. So you watch all those, and you're like, okay, I still know how to.
Exactly. It's not it's not how to play.
But it does help if you don't understand a specific concept and you see.
Yeah. If you're understanding everything, and you're like, so how do tyrants work? Then you can go find their tyrant video.
Right.
So, yeah, they don't have how to plays, but they do have reference videos. But I will say, I think that they did everything in their power. They wanted to make a deep, heavy RPG dice game, and they did everything in their power to, I think, aid in helping players understand, like a character. Beginner build strats, what their innates do, so everything about the character is on here. It's not like you're sitting here and being like, needing 14 different things to figure out what your character can do. It's all here, but yeah, you have the critical details. And once again, I would also say that not all difficulty scales are equal. I think Tantrum as a level 4 is drastically easier than Stanza.
Yeah.
Stanza, I had an aneurysm. Because we picked her, because she's like, I want to play a bard. And I'm like, okay, cool, here, this is the bard. And we were playing, and we were maybe not halfway through, but she wasn't doing anything. And I'm like, okay, well maybe, so I took the sheet and I was looking at it, and not to be like, look at me, but I think I like to think I grasp games pretty well, and I'm staring at, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? Oh, and then it clicked, and I'm like, oh, we're gonna play someone else, because even I wasn't even trying to play her. She was insane, and she's rated as a 4.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, no, there's no way. He's 4, but he's maybe because they don't. It's arbitrary. Why is he a 4? The way he plays doesn't seem like a 4. Is he a 4 because he doesn't have any defense, so he tries to stay alive?
Speaking on that topic, I don't know why they didn't make a 10-minute video about every character.
Yeah.
I mean, not only is that going to explain the character, but if you're trying to sell expansions that have just one character in the box, then that's the best way to sell it.
Oh, yeah.
Is explain how it works, because people are going to gravitate towards that and want to buy it instantly.
Exactly. And so many other games, like the most recent one is Twisted Fables. It's a competitive 1v1 game. In the back of the rulebook it says, her pros and her cons. Oh, Red Riding Hood is, utilizes her cards really well, but she has the lowest health out of everyone. Mm-hmm. That should have easily been on here. Like, you have a beginner build strat, but you could have easily put something down here. Pro about patches. Hey, he can heal really well. Con, he doesn't deal a lot of damage.
Yeah.
Like, something as simple as that to help players kind of... Yeah, you have a beginner build strat, but that doesn't really tell you why you're doing what you're doing. Right. His just says, oh, Dex and another attack die are his first priorities, then increases HP. And it kind of has his skills, and it's like, okay, well, obviously, patches is so basic. You obviously want to get a med kit. He starts with nothing, which honestly, I would say qualifies him to be a 2 difficulty.
Yeah.
He doesn't start with anything.
Yeah.
So he takes a lot of time. You need a lot of training points to make him useful.
Right.
So, honestly, and then you're saying he's a 2 solo. Obviously, a lot of people are saying that that's not the case, which I agree. You wouldn't send a healer to fight anyone.
Right.
So, I think that's also poorly done with that. Everything else about the sheets are really good, but you are going to take some time to learn characters, and if you don't want to invest that time, or if you want to play a quick game of Too Many Bones, it's just not possible.
Right.
So, but I mean, honestly, those are really my only negatives, and they're not even that strong of negatives, because I like deep characters to figure them out.
I did, prior to playing this, I listened to a podcast about this game. I think it was, I'd have to look it up. Anyway, they had great things to say about the game. They did say one of their major critiques was someone had a theory that if you pump all your points into attack and dexterity, there's no way to get past, you just immediately get past everything. I don't know if that's accurate. Mm-hmm. I think that's probably situational based on, if you did that to your character versus mine, that would have a different effect. But yeah. I do wonder how much that has an effect, especially in longer campaigns whenever you're playing. Yeah. A 12-day campaign, if you're just able to get your attack up to 10. You have a maximum of it. But
you have a maximum because it's a D6, but here's the thing, is you're wasting actual time, playing that way, because that's all theoretical. And I do like this about it, is your chances of getting your attack all the way up are very slim. Yeah. Okay, your attack is +3, mine's +1. Mine might be a little bit easier. Well, but if you wanted to get to +6, you're rolling 8 dice.
If you have 3, if you have 3 attack, every time you fail an attack, you can move it over to dexterity, and there are a lot of items that negate that.
Right.
I found 1 or 2 whenever Karini and I played, and I think the game that you and I tried to play, I think
you got the training stick, which prevents 1 bone.
Yeah.
So if you roll 2, I failed.
Right.
And who knows? There is a new expansion coming out, Unbreakable, that comes with a lot of shit. They're maxing out that trove chest. Yeah. That they might... I hope, and I really haven't looked into it because I backed it immediately, because I love the game. I hope they have a redone rulebook. Yeah. Like a condensed, all-in-one rulebook, because after that expansion, they're done with Too Many Bones. Yeah. I would like them to have, because I have a book here, I have an Undertow book, I have a Splice and Dice rulebook. I want an all-in-one thing that just fits and is cohesive. Whenever I need to look up when baddies come in and where they come in, I want to be able to find that immediately. Right. And not trudge through the tutorial setup at the back and all the pictures. Yeah. And normally those are good, but this is just a weirdly done rulebook. They tried to section it off. Mm-hmm. It's like, hey, now you understand Gearlocs. Now you understand baddies. It's like, but what do I do on my turn? How does a turn structure work?
Right.
So it feels all over the place, and they kind of shot themselves in the foot by not having video tutorials.
Yeah.
But they allude to that.
Yeah.
Hey, watch a video to figure it out, and like you're like, oh, I'll watch them.
And there's a surprising lack of. Usually, there's other content creators who are making videos about stuff. I don't know why. This is a pretty big game.
It is a big game. I was looking up one too.
There's not very many videos about it. Maybe it's because people can't understand it. There's a lot of videos of people setting up a scenario and then very fastly moving through it, and it's very complex.
Yeah.
So you have to like take your time with
it's
it.
like I do how to play videos on my channel, mainly if there isn't one already. This might be a good one to do, but I can see the challenge of me. It's like you can probably do an overview on how a turn structure works, but the game really isn't here. It's on your character. So you can't really do a how to play without just doing one on every single character.
Yeah.
That's a lot of time
Yeah.
to understand, because it's like you can give a basic over level of the characters, but then how much does that help anyone?
Right.
So it is kind of it's a what do they call it? It has a high barrier to entry to get into, which might be why not a lot of people have it.
Yeah.
Because Cloudspire, I think, is a little more digestible, and it does the same thing. It wants to be an MMO with unique races and different builds of how you want to play those.
And I would say this is as complex as Gloomhaven, I think.
Yeah. I'd probably say the same.
Gloomhaven is, I mean, I like to think it's pretty popular, but I don't know. I think it's the way it's organized. I think if it was re-implemented, it would be much more digestible.
Yeah, Gloomhaven has a 50-page rulebook, but there are how-to-play videos out there for it.
Yeah.
There's 2 of them by Paul Grogan.
And a lot of that information isn't necessary to start the game.
Exactly.
It gets progressively
and
more complex as you go on.
And still, in terms of RPG games, Gloomhaven, I think, blows us out of the water.
Yeah.
Like, that feels
it's
like...
hard to compare it to that game. Because
This is a one-of-a-kind game, though, and I actually really, really like that, because I have not seen a dice... I mean, there are dice builder games, and bag builders and, deck builders and all those kind of things, but there's none that are implemented in a campaign fantasy style.
Sure.
So, and all the negatives that we're mentioning, I think they're valid. Like, they exist and could be huge detriments for a lot of people.
Right.
Like, you can talk about, oh, you want to build a certain way, but it still relies on luck. People are already checked out.
Right.
For me, it doesn't bug me that much. Once again, because they're one-shots. If this was a campaign, then I'd be pissed.
Yeah.
Like, oh man, I fucking can't heal you again. Great. Like 6 months into this campaign, and I'm just, it could easily be done. But because it's one-shots, I don't take it too seriously. And it could also be just because each time we've played as these characters, we do really well. Even against the final boss, you were KO'd, but I have my liquid life to keep you alive. And then if we failed again, then we would have died. Because I'm like, well... But even then, if we fight the tyrant, it's not like, you failed, he killed you, it's over. It's like, oh, okay, we lost a day. He was, I think, a 12-day tyrant.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we ended on day 8.
Yeah.
And it gives you a game length, which is nice. Some reason why we're going to fight him. I think what art they do have is nice. I actually, and this was in Robinson Crusoe, I love the kind of like sketch art on it. So, because with Cloudspire, we were talking about the campaign, or not the campaign, the narrative. Cloudspire's narrative and campaign comes in their solo games. Like, they have 2 massive books that are lore on each of the factions, why they're fighting each other, and you go through the campaign solo. Yeah. Which I would say Cloudspire is a 1 or 2 player game like this one.
Yeah.
I think that's what they need here. They need, like, a narrative. I like books. And if it's because of reading, then Foreteller is always a fantastic app. But I think that they would do really well with having that. If they don't already, with their campaigns.
Right.
So one thing we haven't talked about, funny enough, we kept talking about kind of the overall aspects of everything else. What do you think of the actual game, like the actual battle part?
I mean, I'm a big Final Fantasy fan, and this reminds me of a turn-based RPG. That was a good example. Whereas those games that I mentioned before are very... D&D inspired.
Mm-hmm.
This is video game inspired for sure.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm comparing it to a complex RPG that I play, this reminds me of the way that those work, but the way that this system works, it somehow turns out to you have a limited amount of options. I feel like I'm critiquing it again. I'm really like, again, this is one of the things that whenever I was looking up the game and trying to figure out how it worked, they kept on saying how you have endless possibilities. And I do see some possibilities in this, but I look at some of, like, for example, these 3 abilities, you cannot move, or you cannot update their stronger abilities until you update that ability.
You have to get the die before you get the other one.
Only, I think, 1 out of the 3 was useful to me.
Yeah.
At least it seemed initially.
Mm-hmm.
We got to that end scenario, and I just kept on like looking at my dice, and I'm like, none of these abilities are really going to work for me. They kind of work for only baddies.
Sure.
Which is specific to the boss. The boss is supposed to be different than that. I totally understand that. But yeah, it reminds me of a video game.
Yeah, that's true. It actually, Final Fantasy is a good example. Well, the earlier Final Fantasies, now they're all free roam.
And bad.
But, Final Fantasy 15's great. I loved it. Okay, I'm like, I loved 15.
Bunch of bros.
I haven't done, the emo bro, trying to make get their first gig.
Yeah.
But, like, 7 and 10 and stuff, that's exactly what it is. I think a lot of people who are going into thinking it's going to be D&D inspired are heavily disappointed because this map is really just kind of like a placeholder.
Yeah.
You do move around it, and they do too, and there are, luckily, like, benefits to potentially moving away to get a better position, but most likely you're going to be standing in the same position.
Right.
It becomes, and then like you mentioned, this is like the turn-based, and then this reminds me of your character's skill tree. Like Star Ocean, like the longest fucking JRPG in the world,
right.
Where it's like, okay, I have 1 experience point. I'm going to get this. Well, to get this better, ability, I need, that, and then I need to move it over. They connect through the star grid or whatever.
Right.
That's what it reminds me of. So that doesn't bug me as much. It's like, oh, I really want to get the chain reactor. Well, I need to get these first before I can do that. And then your dexterity and stuff is what allows you to utilize them. That makes thematic sense to me as well, at least. You got to give some theme to chips.
Yeah.
And I think they do as best as they can because they're called chip theory, so every game has chips on it.
Right.
And, but for the most part, it really comes down to this is a puzzle. Who do we need to kill first? How do we get there? Because these are the baddie skills that are the biggest pain in the ass.
Right.
So I like the game. I think that it definitely holds a place in my collection in terms of cooperative RPG style games. Just like Madara is on my collection, Gloomhaven is in my collection, whatever other campaign games I have, Fireteam Zero. So games like that, because I love cooperative games and sharing the story. Mm-hmm. And this isn't long. Like, this one was a length 4, which is about a couple hours, 2.5 hours, which is not bad. I don't know if in that 2.5 hours you were like trying to like, come on, this really needs to be over. But I was.
We got to the end and I was like ready to build. The thing I always shoot for in RPGs is just building a monster of a character and then going to the boss and like one-hitting them.
Right.
So that's what I wanted to do in this game, of course.
I don't have enough attack dice.
I wanted to go to day 11 and get 19 strength and then just go and one-hit the guy. That was my plan initially.
Just show up, you're all roided out.
We might have went into that and got like the worst scenario in the world and we would have died in the scenario. I have no idea. There is some scenarios that suck. There's some that, like that health scenario, we got to run around and kill
the bugs because we were exhausted.
And we ended up having like 5 extra health in the next scenario because we had bonus health. So it just depends.
Yeah, and I think that's where the variety comes in. I see where you're coming from on replayability. It isn't unlimited replayability for sure, but I think it's pretty close. Yeah, you are going to see the encounters again, especially the opening 3. They need to fix that. Yeah. I think it's fixed in Undertow and Age of Tyranny. I think there's different opening special encounters for those. So in the base game, it's really bad. Like, at that point, you just will remember and be like, okay, well, we're going to do this in this way. I have 3 training points, so let's just start, and then you jump into the encounters. Which is not a bad thing. It's just kind of nice. I would have liked some kickoff. Because like I don't like competitive games where it's like every game you play you start off the exact same way. That's one of my only complaints about Scythe.
Yeah.
It's like, yep, I'm this character. I'm in this location
Yeah.
with these resources.
Right.
But other than that, yeah, I think the wording is fun. It's whimsical. It's enough flavor that for a game that looks like this, really boring, it doesn't feel boring. When you're moving and taking damage from chips, when you're rolling your dice, you're not thinking about that it's chips and dice.
Yeah.
At least I'm not.
Yeah, I'm not either.
So, I think that's it. I think that's all I can think of. Do you have anything else that you... Cool. So, on a scale of 1 to 10, what do you give it?
Probably a 7.5.
7.5? Okay. That is lower than I thought. Why? No. No, that makes sense, though. I think 7.5. Especially because you had mentioned... I mean, is that because of just the base game? Do you think it would go up if you had everything?
I don't think so, because I'm quantifying it by how much money you spend.
That is true. But you bought everything for KDM. It's a third of the price.
And KDM lasted for a long time. There was... If I'm talking about high highs and low lows,
yeah,
KDM never got as high as Gloomhaven for me. Gloomhaven I'd give an 8.
Okay.
Probably. And I only say that just because cooperative combat games are not one of my like go-to games usually. Mm-hmm. It requires a lot of organization, finding all the right friends, finding people who get along.
True.
Then you always have that friend who wants to quarterback and tell one what to do. So like there's always that issue, but I like this one a lot. I think my group would like it.
Yeah. All those issues are extremely valid for these kinds of games. I completely never have those issues because I don't max out players.
Yeah.
I refuse to play Gloomhaven with 4. Love the idea because I would love the character synergy, but that doesn't do it enough for me to be like, this one scenario is going to take 4 hours. Yeah. And I have to deal with you. But I also don't play with people that then that's my thought. I have to deal with you. It's like, I'm just not going to play with you.
Right.
So in this case, it's either I'm playing the solo or I'm going to play with one other person. It's like, I think I can manage dealing with one other person if I don't like them that much.
Right.
So for me, all the critiques that we had on it, I think are valid. They exist. But those don't bother me as much. I haven't had a nasty experience where I was just pissed off at everything that could happen. And I have had that in Gloomhaven. And I give Gloomhaven a 10. Because it just does everything right for me. Yeah. Sleeping Gods is also a 10. Madara got a 9. I'm going to give this one a 9 as well.
Cool.
I very much like it. I wish I had the box. I don't. But, and props on them for making a organized way for this game.
Yeah, I like the magnet thing to the doors. That's really neat.
Yeah, the trove chest is badass. If you have everything, you are never hauling it. Like, people are coming to your house to play. But I do think that with this being a game, there's no reason for multiple people in the same gaming group to have one.
Right.
Like, you selling it, it's just like, well, I have everything.
Yeah.
I'm going to play with one other person. You know the game, so I'm most likely playing it with you.
Right.
But yeah, I think this one's a blast. And because I don't play games over and over and over and over again, the replayability for me is endless.
Yeah.
I won't get tired of patches because I won't play this game all the time. So when I do, it's like, oh yeah, we need a healer. Or the opposite end, if you do play them a lot, now you can teach the game a little bit better.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, here you go. You can try patches. Like with Root. I have that experience with Root.
Well, can we... You said you played Stanza?
Yeah, no, Kat played Stanza. I read her sheet.
Oh.
and I was like, I know how she works, but at the time we were learning the game. Yeah. We hadn't played Too Many Bones before, so I think I picked Picket and she picked Stanza, and I was like, what the fuck is going on?
I mean, if I could go back, I probably would have just bought Undertow because Undertow has a considerably higher score.
It's
almost 1 point, I want to say.
I think it's a standalone expansion, and it's essentially it's another base set.
And I've heard that they made it after the base game, so I think that they ironed out some of the kinks. But from what I've heard from people who played it, I talked to to Nick,
Mm-hmm.
and he had the same opinion. He loved Undertow.
That
so.
seems to be the general consensus.
And I think it would be interesting to play with the two characters that were with Undertow with that story, because the idea, because you're on a boat
yeah.
in Undertow, that idea is really thematic. The little map that you play on is a boat. That's cool.
Yeah, there is an actual map that you kind of like. It's like a country map. Yeah, and that one does have a campaign. Who was in that? Stanza and Duster?
Yes.
Yes. And I've seen both of them played. Kat, funny enough, actually played both of those.
Yeah.
But so yeah, actually, I'm gonna talk myself out. I'm still holding on the 9, but I like the rebuttal that I just did. So props to me. But yeah, like with Root, asymmetrical gameplay, completely different. Jumping into that is hard for anyone, but if you have an experienced player, you can be like, oh yeah, okay, so what? Yeah, okay, so here's the Eerie, like they're programming, so here's how they work. You can teach it. Same thing here. Where if you play a character over, like if you play Tantrum, you're kind of tired of him. All right, learn a new character, and if you have a new group or a new player, oh here, you try Tantrum, and I can help you because it's cooperative.
Right.
So there are ways around kind of the critiques, and they're nothing glaring for me. So yeah, 9 out of 10.
Cool.
Rulebook is ass. But anyway, that's our thoughts on Too Many Bones. Let us know what you think of the game in the comments below. Other than that, like, comment, share, and subscribe, and have a wonderful whatever time of day it is for you.
Goodbye.
Hey everyone, thank you for watching, and I really hope that you enjoyed the video. If you would like to see more of my content, go ahead and click that subscribe button and the bell to be notified whenever I upload any new content. If you feel like supporting the channel, you can go ahead and click that Patreon link to be taken to my Patreon, and any help is truly appreciated. Other than that, stick around for any other run-throughs or reviews or cool top 10s or whatever I feel like putting on. Other than that, like, comment, share, and subscribe, and have a wonderful whatever time of day it is for you.